Hello and welcome to another episode of Intersections, Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. My name is Elisa Gwilliam, and today I have the pleasure to be talking with Executive Director of Mental Health America Dutchess, Andrew O'Grady, and joining us by phone, Professor of Psychology and Co-Director of the National Organization of Adult Addiction and Recovery, Dr. Larry Force. So Larry, do you want to get us started today?
I will, thank you. And thank you for the introductions. And we're so glad that everybody's here today. As Alyssa said, my name is Dr. Larry Force. I'm a professor of psychology and director of the Center on Aging and Disability Policy at Mount St. Mary College. And there's some background noise because I'm in transit on an Amtrak. So with the use of technology, here we are. It's a pleasure that we're able to do this. This is our third season. We're getting really great reviews, and we know that even through COVID, beyond COVID, in COVID, through COVID, and beyond COVID, our voice is being heard. So at this point, what I'd like to do is introduce Andrew O'Grady, who's the Executive Director of Mental Health of America. Andrew?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Today, I'm pretty excited. We have a guest here who I got to know pretty well over the last year or so, leading into COVID. And she's a very good friend of another friend of mine who happened to be on this show early on, Eileen, and she was on with her daughter, Brenna. And that was an interesting story and one that was very important. And we want to highlight people's pathways to recovery, because everybody has a different pathway. Everybody has, different things that work for them to find that key to be healthier. And Judy I met her because she called and she asked if she could utilize our space, because she runs I believe an AA meeting Monday nights, and she utilized our space, and it was great to have her there. And now she's back I believe at a church that allows her to do it there. And it was really nice to meet her, and her story is pretty incredible. So I wanted her to have her on because she, we talk about breaking down the silos. We reference the old Hudson River Psychiatric Center at times and how that's all changed drastically. In fact, it's not there anymore. And, Judy has experienced it all in her lifetime. And so welcome, Judy. And I wanted to just, ask you if you would share a little bit about yourself and your pathway to recovery. What worked and what didn't. You're welcome.
Yeah. I start with the idea that as an alcoholic, I had reasons to drink, and everybody who I have met who has come into AA had reasons to begin drinking. And they are as varied as alcoholics are varied. But anyway, with me, it was a case of being very young, being 19, and finding out through various botched surgeries that I could not have any children. And my husband to be and I were disappointed, but we got married anyway, and we adopted 2 girls. And I did not really have a strong liking to alcohol in the beginning, even though I had parents who enjoyed drinking, and I enjoyed as a little kid running around drinking the rest of everybody's glasses of beer or whatever was in. So I really feel that not only am I an alcoholic due to my behavior, but I think I'm an alcoholic that certainly inherited certain tendencies, certain behaviors that I found out that alcohol could soothe. So after we got married, I pursued a degree in speech and hearing therapy. And we adopted the girls when they were 2 months and 3 months old. They were about 3 years apart. And as they grew up, I found that when they behaved crying or when they could not be soothed, I began to decide that I shouldn't have been a mother to begin with. But I had whatever it took to be a mother, I didn't have. I didn't have the sympathy. I didn't have the empathy. I didn't have the, I became frightened as they had their normal, growing up. So when I was 36, which was about 1974, I found that alcohol was truly a calming effect on me. And I used that alcohol consistently to try to calm my anxieties about my children's behavior. And I think I felt, well, they were somebody else's babies, and I really wasn't the one who should have them. But unfortunately, this had an effect on my girls. I think they felt abandoned, and I surely didn't feel adequate. But I did well in my profession and made advances, which allowed me to at least behave professionally as a human being with assets and not so many disabilities. But as the alcohol intake increased, I found myself going into deep depression and didn't realize till years later that that depression was not only enhanced by the drinking of the alcohol, but it also became really an addiction, where the only way I could figure out how to calm myself down or how to get to sleep was with the alcohol. And the problem being, as I found out years later, that with alcohol, as I became more addicted to it, I needed it more. And I felt that my life was really based on how I could get my hands on alcohol. And at that time, I could go out into the parking lot during my lunch hour and drink beer and come back in nonchalante, yeah. Took on my students that I was helping with speech. But this didn't last too long. I found myself unable at times to come back into the building and resume my duties. And then, and it's all very gray to me as I look back. But then in the early 1970s, I began not to work at all. And I found myself down in the basement and completely cut off from my family. And they, not understanding what in the world was going on, saw me as a person with mental illness. And so one night, and that was in 1974, one night I decided that I should do away with myself. So I got into the car, and I found out since that alcoholics deep down really want to cling on to life. And so I must have indicated to my husband or somebody in the family that I was going to drive down to the bridge and jump off the Hudson Bridge. So I drove down. I was in my nightgown and my robe, and the police were waiting. And they were very empathetic. And I don't know where my family was, but the next thing I knew, they took me to Hudson River State Hospital. And when I got there, I wanted more medicine. I wanted more something, more alcohol, something. And I found myself completely separated from the other human beings there. And I can remember it was a big room in Ryan Hall, and there were 40 cots, and there were 40 women each in one of those cots. And they could not give me, I found out later, more medicine, whatever that medicine would be, probably antidepressant or something to calm me down. I found myself begging for medication, and they explained to me, your blood pressure is so low that we can't give you any medication. So I curled up in a ball in the corner of one of those rooms in Ryan Hall at Hudson River State Hospital. And the entire experience was long. I think it was close to a month. My family, my husband would come to visit me. And sometimes I was allowed home on the weekend, but my husband figured out that the alcohol was what kept me, fairly calm. So he gave me all the alcohol I wanted on the weekend. And then I got back to Hudson River and found out, that I couldn't have anything, even medicine. So I became convinced that I was a mentally ill patient, that my life was nothing more than a mental illness. And that continued until 1976. And I went to a hospital down in White Plains, Cornell Medical. And I remember at the time that I was in a bed and I had a helmet on. And I was told later the reason for the helmet was I kept banging my head against the wall. And now I see that that's a very typical behavior of people who are so depressed. And in my case, I had all the alcohol I wanted on the weekends and then none during. So I acted very, I think, self-destructive. And
Judy, it's Larry. Judy, can I just say something?
yes, Larry.
Your story, great, Larry, of course. As you're presenting your story, the words that I'm writing down are powerful, honest, insightful, and direct. Because we cross the recovery stage. Some people are years into recovery. And the story that you just weaved together, from the impact on family to the wearing of the helmet, you have no idea how powerful that story is, and will be so helpful for many people who are in that same situation only hours and days into recovery. So I really want to thank you for that. And that whole idea of being confused with the addiction and mental illness thing, it's a very powerful statement. So I want to thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, I'd like to
Andrew,
ask. Yeah, I'd like to ask if number one, did you have any serious withdrawal symptoms? Because I don't know that they had the medical technology back then. Maybe they did to really manage that. It can be very bad. It can cause death to withdraw from alcohol without the right medications. And you were saying they wouldn't give you anything. And then two, I'd love to hear, what it was that, maybe I shouldn't make assumptions, but I'm guessing you're many, many years into sobriety right now. And how you got there, and what was the thing that flipped the switch in your head and said, I got to stop this nonsense?
Well, in order to treat the depression at this mental hospital, they gave me 15 electroshock treatments. And for some reason or other, I think they had a tendency to work for me. Again, remembering this is all very gray memory, but I can remember playing volleyball at the hospital, and I fell down, cracked my head, and I went around with a bandage on the top of my head for quite a while. But believe it or not, I don't know, I felt like an ordinary human being. For some reason or other, I went home, I was treated, medically. And, but I must admit, I didn't for 3 years know anything about AA. And what happened was, when I was released and sent home, 2 or 3 times I found myself deciding that I couldn't undertake the responsibility of a family. So I said to my husband, I need to go back to the hospital. So I went 2 or 3 times to what at that time was Spelman floor at the hospital, St. Francis Hospital. And by 1976, there was a nurse there that said to me, Judy, do you suppose you're so depressed because alcohol might have something to do with it? And she said, her knowledge was rudimentary, but she knew of a rehab in Pennsylvania called Chit Chat, and she suggested that I go. And to me, all right, that's another hospital, and that's also less responsibility. So I said, sure, I will go there. So I went there for 28 days. And what I found out was people who stopped drinking somehow or other began to have histories of less depression, histories of more willing to take on responsibility. So after I left that rehab, I decided to join AA because they suggested that was the program that they found to be most helpful to anybody with a addiction to alcohol. And of course, not to mention that I had a lot of pills too that were prescribed to me. So the idea of being mentally ill stuck with me, even though I didn't drink. And I enjoyed AA. I enjoyed listening to the people. I was impressed with their ability to stay sober and to have a joyous outlook. And I stayed sober. I didn't drink, but I did not have a joyous outlook. And what I did was continue to go to meetings, but I also spent 2 different times back in the hospital, back down to White Plains. And finally, I was in White Plains in 1976, 75 and 76. And I looked at all the people. I was by that time on the geriatric ward. And I looked at all these people who wouldn't even keep their clothes on. And I had to keep putting sheets around them and taking care of them. And then finally, I believe my higher power said, you know, you really are capable of doing more than covering up patients with sheets. So I said to my husband, I think I'm done with this. I think I want to go back into the real world. So at that time, I had not had a drink for 11 years. And the group that I belonged to decided when I came out of the hospital that I should celebrate my 11 years sober. And it made me cry because I didn't even know that I was a valuable person to those people, and that they really felt celebrating 11 years without a drink had nothing to do with going to the hospital. And after I came home and after I celebrated, my sponsor, Janet, got a call from North Road Psychiatric Services, and they wanted to know, do you know anybody that has a history of mental illness and is a declared sober alcoholic? And she said, I certainly do. So we began meeting, you know, the people at the North Road facility had counselors during the day, but they did not know what it was to go to an AA meeting. So they consistently held on to their mental illness. But we started a program at that facility, 230 North Road, on Monday nights, and we called it Double Recovery. And my sponsor, who never had had a pill in her life that had to do with mental illness, stuck by with me meeting after meeting after meeting. And I finally got the idea that I am an alcoholic and I am not a victim of mental illness. I'm a victim of alcoholism. And that's what brought on all those symptoms. But nobody in those hospitals on a White Plain had any indication that the alcohol was the source of my problem. So you're right,
You know,
Andy.
Judy, I want to,
Yeah, Larry.
if you're putting this together, Andrew, Alyssa, and I have two pictures. And I know that Alyssa has the capability of bringing them up. And one of them is a picture of Hudson River, the main building coming down. And underneath it, we have a tagline that says, mental health at its best, tearing down the walls. Andrew's a strong, strong advocate of widening the door to come in, not have two separate doors, not one for addiction and one for mental health. So I'm not sure if you can see that picture at this point, but then there's another picture. And that other picture Andrew will talk to, and that's about the idea of unifying both mental health and addictions.
And Judy, is that meeting that you started at North Road, I don't know, 40 years ago on a Monday night? Is that the same meeting you're doing now?
Yes.
Wow.
Now we're doing it at the Sober Club. We were doing it at your facility, Mental Health America. And then when the Sober Club opened, where we didn't need to wear masks and they cleaned all the furniture and so on. So about 4 weeks ago, we went back, but this time, rather than Double Recovery, we called it Back from the Edge.
Wow, very nice.
Mainly because the Sober Club wanted it to be mainly about alcoholism, but they also realized that it affected people and caused mental illness. So that's why we call it Back from the Edge, meaning back from that edge of the horrors of mental illness and realizing that it's an addiction to alcohol.
Yeah, we in the field, in the clinical field, we focus. It kind of goes in waves, and I wish it was just a standard practice instead of everybody. Right now it's starting again, where everybody the big push in Dutchess County is for everybody to be duly trained in both, and so anybody you see feels comfortable in treating, and understanding how the two are intertwined, typically it's come and gone in waves. People get their training and then they move on and they just fall back into their little silo and they focus only on mental health or only on addiction. So we really have to move everybody to understanding that alcoholism and drug addiction can cause mental health problems, and many times people drink to to medicate themselves because it's the one thing that helps them escape their depression or the anxiety that they're feeling. You have, regardless of whether you've had deep depression or it was just alcoholism or whatever you landed on it being, you are clearly, for the last 30 years, you were helping tons of people, and you've easily succeeded in moving forward. I hate to say beating it, because you never believe that you conquered it, because it's always there. But
Right.
you've certainly done an amazing thing, and the lives you've touched in this community for the last 40 years of doing this double recovery group every single Monday is tremendous. And thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely, thank you. And are you able to see a picture of the bell? And then would you be able to give the history of that? Because I think that really adds testimony to Judy's story. Blending together two different paths and making it strong and ironclad.
Yeah, I think it was a little before the time that you were at Ross and the other places, but definitely it was before that time. And I think they got past it by then. But back in the early 1900s, 50 years before you were there, they were shackling They were
Really?
shackling the patients to the walls and,
Yeah. Yeah.
chains and shackles. And the head of all MHAs, the founder of MHAs, the Clifford Beers, said, "Give me all those shackles and give me all those chains," because he was in there like you. And he said, "This is just inhumane and not the right way to treat people. And, give me all that stuff." And they forged this bell, which I happen to have another picture I'll send you. Elisa, for next time, I have a picture standing next to that bell. I was just there 2 weeks ago down in Washington, D.C., and the bell was there. And it's a true testimony. It is truly forged from chains and shackles at various psychiatric centers throughout the country. And yeah, we learn and we come a long way. And I always say that, we're still in our infancy, 100 years into learning how to treat stuff like addiction and mental health. And we're going to look back, people are going to look back 50 years from now and say, "Why did we do it that way? That was not, the right way to do it." But we're doing the best we can, and we're learning, and we're
Yes.
learning what works. And people like you who found a path for yourself and know that for people that truly, embrace what you were doing in the AA meetings, their life could be changed. And so for you,
But I want to say this though. Think about this, all of us on this call, even within the confines of our own life, the treatment modality has changed and has become more specialized and more specific and more successful. We know much more today about addictive behaviors and addiction and the biochemistry,
yeah,
even within the span of our own lives.
true. We've got a lot of technology now, and Larry and I are going to talk about that in another episode of this. And we're going to talk about how technology can really impact people's lives and get them to a place that is healthier. And well, I love this story, Judy. I wish we had you on every 3 weeks. You'd be great. But you just keep doing your own story. You do your own intersections every Monday night, and you share this story with people, and people hear it, and they. That's the great thing about AA, people's stories, because people need to hear various story. Not one story is not gonna do it for everybody, but sooner or later somebody hangs on to something that fits for them, and they take off, and they find a much brighter place when they're not using alcohol.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you did. Yeah.
I'm 85 and enjoying a wonderful life because of no more alcohol and no more mental illness.
That's fantastic. True recovery.
That's wonderful. True. And thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All righty, Lisa, what do you got?
If you want to hear this episode again, share it with friends, or even leave a comment. Log on to our website, www.intersections-exchange.com. Thank you, Judy.